Hello, you're watching A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are your top stories. The APEC summit adopts declarations on AI and demographic change. Türkiye announces a Gaza meeting amid ceasefire concerns. Brazil calls for international support for climate-vulnerable nations ahead of COP30. The APEC summit wraps up in Gyeongju, South Korea. Key discussions focused on regional cooperation, artificial intelligence and demographic change, while China announced it will host next year's summit in Shenzhen.
Leaders of 21 Asia-Pacific nations have concluded the APEC summit in the South Korean city of Gyeongju, adopting the Gyeongju Declaration, a roadmap to strengthen regional cooperation and safeguard global economic stability. Over 2 days of discussions, leaders agreed to deepen collaboration on trade, investment and technology, emphasizing the need for a united response to global challenges.
This year, through the Gyeongju Declaration, we restored cooperation among APEC members and broadened APEC's horizons as a platform to tackle humanity's shared challenges by launching the AI Initiative and the APEC Joint Framework for responding to demographic change.
The highlight of the summit was the meeting between US President Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping. The two leaders reached an agreement to de-escalate their trade dispute. Soon after the talks, President Trump departed South Korea, allowing Xi to take center stage at the summit.
China will host the 33rd APEC leaders meeting in Shenzhen, Guangdong province, in November next year.
President Xi's announcement that China will host the next APEC summit in 2026 underscores Beijing's growing influence in shaping the region's economic agenda.
The Chinese government comes out with its priorities. We're looking for more openness, a focus on innovation and on cooperation as well. Connectivity has been something that China has focused on over the past 10 years at least, building throughout its rail network. Are there lessons that can be learned through their own domestic processes as well? And then again, talking about trade, how has China trade changed over the past few years? What is China exporting now compared to the 25 years ago? All of our economies go through changes, so it'll be interesting to hear through the next plan and through the APEC hosting, what we can learn from that.
Pedrosa added that more openness and innovation will be essential for the Asia-Pacific economy in the years ahead. China has previously hosted APEC summits in 2001 and 2014 and will once again welcome world leaders in 2026, this time in the tech hub of Shenzhen.
High-level talks between Chinese and European Union trade delegations have concluded in the Belgian capital. Both sides were tight-lipped immediately after the day-long meeting with European Commissioner Maros Šefčovič, expected to provide an update on Saturday. Tensions between the EU and China have been building over recent months, especially over the issue of China's export controls on rare earths. William Denslow reports from Brussels.
This high-level technical meeting held between Chinese and European Commission trade delegations came at an incredibly precarious time, especially for Europe's auto industry. The reason for that is a geopolitical spat between the Netherlands and China, where the Netherlands has taken back control of a chip maker that's owned by a Chinese firm, citing national security concerns. Now, that spat has led to huge concerns about the supply of chips used in auto vehicles. Now, the auto sector and industry experts from that sector have warned that it could just be days before the impacts of that spat and the disruption of the supply chain could start to be widely felt. They're calling for a swift resolution. This is one part of a broader dispute when it comes to the export of rare earths, these crucial technology used in everyday chips, vital for electronics in so many devices. Now, we know that earlier this week there was seemingly a breakthrough between the United States and China after President Trump and President Xi met just a few days ago. Real questions now about how that meeting will have a knock-on effect for the EU's stance with China, and will that mean there'll be more of a flow of these chips into the European Union going forward? We reporters, including myself, have asked what exactly this will mean. Well, the Commission has been tight-lipped going into this meeting. All eyes will be on the exact resolution, what came out of Friday's meeting. So all eyes will be on that. When it comes to the European Union's efforts to better protect its supply chains going forward, well, we've heard from Henna Virkkunen, the tech commissioner, who said that as part of the CHIPS 2.0 plan that the Commission is working on, that aims to better anticipate disruptions, to invest in security of the supply chain, as well as do more when it comes to stockpiling and diversification when it comes to these critical materials. But in the meantime, while the European Union tries to ramp up its production, its recycling of these vital chips, there are real hopes from industry here in Europe that these high-level talks with Chinese counterparts can begin to yield real results when it comes to the flow of these chips into Europe. William Denslow, Frey News, Brussels.
Chinese electric vehicles are gaining traction across Europe. The BYD EVs have been registered nearly 5 times as much as last year, pushing the Chinese automaker closer to Tesla's market share. For more on the rise of Chinese EVs, we go to Beijing and our Maknoor Maktoum.
Chinese electric vehicle giant BYD saw its new car registrations in Europe soar nearly 5-fold in September 2025, reaching just under 25,000 units, according to industry data. The surge narrowed its gap with market leader Tesla, which logged about 39,800 registrations, down roughly 10% year-on-year. BYD's sharp growth reflects its aggressive expansion strategy across Europe, offering competitively priced models such as Arrow 3, Dolphin, and Seal, alongside a growing dealership network and localized marketing. The company's planned manufacturing plant in Hungary also signals long-term commitment to the region and aims to reduce costs and tariff exposure. The rise is driven by a mix of affordable pricing, a broader model lineup, and tight supply chain control that allows BYD to keep costs low despite global inflation pressures. Strong partnerships with local dealers have expanded reach in key markets such as Germany, France, and the UK, while local production plans have boosted confidence among European regulators and consumers. According to industry experts, BYD's combination of cost efficiency, rapid localization, and product variety is helping it challenge Tesla's dominance and reshaping Europe's EV landscape, highlighting China's growing influence in the global electric vehicle market. One of them, News, Beijing.
Over in Moldova, Alexandru Munteanu has been elected as the new Prime Minister after the country's parliament in Chisinau backed his nomination. The pro-European economist and investment firm founder has spent nearly 2 decades working abroad and has no previous political experience. His appointment marks another step in Moldova's push toward closer ties with the European Union as the country continues to distance itself from Russian influence. Serbia marks a year since the tragic Novi Sad railway station collapse, as thousands of students and citizens gather to honour the 16 victims and demand political change. The nationwide movement led by students and professors has reignited hope and activism across the country.
Thousands of students from across Serbia gathered in Novi Sad on Friday, on the eve of the first anniversary of last November's railway station roof collapse that claimed 16 lives. The tragedy sparked a largely peaceful nationwide protest movement led by university students and professors, challenging President Alexander Vucic's 13-year rule.
The feelings are positive, but I cannot explain why. We believe, and I feel, that the students have brought hope back to us. That means a lot after the hopelessness we have lived in for the last 15 to 20 years. Now it must get better. We have to go all the way, and I think the end is near.
Demonstrators marching from various cities across the country are calling for a snap election, aiming to remove Vučić and his Serbian Progressive Party from power.
We have been talking here for 30 years, protesting the whole time, and everything seems the same, but we still hope for change. We will not give up. Sometimes we get tired, but we keep going.
Today's commemoration in Novi Sad will be held outside the railway station, featuring 16 minutes of silence, followed by speeches from students.
Society has changed, and that is the greatest achievement that has happened to us. I think the students have woken people up, and this march they are holding is something very beautiful and important.
Farmers on tractors, motorcyclists and cyclists joined the procession, forming a solidarity convoy across the city, with crowds waving Serbian flags and holding flares. Protesters said the student movement has reignited public engagement and activism across Serbia.
Türkiye is set to host several foreign ministers in Istanbul on Monday to discuss the Gaza ceasefire and steps for a possible stabilization force. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan announced the meeting following talks with his Estonian counterpart Margus Tsakna in Ankara. He said the talks would gather foreign ministers of countries that took part in a meeting with US President Donald Trump in New York in September, including Türkiye, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Pakistan and Indonesia. Both ministers called for stronger international efforts to ensure humanitarian access and maintain peace.
Firstly, negotiations with the parties are continually ongoing to ensure the ceasefire remains in place and to avoid misunderstandings. Necessary efforts are underway to ensure the inflow of humanitarian aid. Furthermore, how to proceed to the second phase, how to implement stability force and other peace plan specified bodies are currently under discussion with guarantor countries. Some are in advanced discussions, while others are in the early stages.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza is truly catastrophic, and significant pressure must be applied on Israel. We thank Türkiye once again for its efforts regarding Gaza. Estonia continues delivering humanitarian assistance to Gaza through UNRWA and other organizations, and we support a two-state solution in line with UN resolutions.
On the ground, Hamas has returned the bodies of 2 deceased Israeli hostages on Thursday in the first handover of hostages' bodies in 9 days. Blake Sifton has more in Tel Aviv.
Hamas returned the bodies of 2 deceased hostages to Israel on Thursday. Both were Israeli hostages who were taken from their communities near the Gaza border on October 7th and died in captivity. The return is the first time in 9 days that Hamas has returned hostage bodies. In exchange, the Israeli government returned 30 Palestinian bodies to Gaza on Friday. Now, with this return, 11 hostage bodies still remain in Gaza. That's of the 28 that were in Gaza at the time the ceasefire came into effect. The Israeli government says that Hamas knows where the majority of the hostage bodies are, and they have accused the group of violating the ceasefire by purposely delaying the return of the hostage bodies. Along with an attack on Israeli soldiers in Rafah, the slow pace of the return of the hostage bodies was part of the Israeli military's justification, the Israeli government's justification for a wave of airstrikes they carried out in Gaza on Tuesday and Wednesday. Local health officials say over 100 Palestinians were killed in those airstrikes. Now, Hamas says that they are doing everything they can to return the bodies quickly. They say they are buried under rubble and it will take time and heavy machinery to find them. In recent days, international teams from Egypt as well as the Red Cross have joined the search for bodies in Gaza. And there are reports that a Turkish team, an 80-strong Turkish team that are expert in recovering bodies from earthquakes, are standing by near Gaza to enter and to assist in the search, but they are still waiting for approval from Israeli authorities. Now, meanwhile, the umbrella group that represents the family members of the hostages held in Gaza, they have criticized the Israeli government for failing to explain why it is taking so long to return the bodies, and they have demanded an urgent meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Blake Sifton for A News in Tel Aviv.
Türkiye is set to host several foreign ministers in Istanbul on Monday to discuss the Gaza ceasefire and potential steps toward a stabilization force. As diplomatic efforts shift from truce to post-conflict management, Ankara's role and the feasibility of such a force are raising key questions about who will secure Gaza under what mandate. To unpack the latest on the Gaza ceasefire, I'm now joined by Dawood Kutab, a Palestinian journalist and former professor of journalism at Princeton University from Amman, Jordan. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Turkey's hosting of these talks signals its intent to play a bigger role in shaping the post-war landscape in Gaza. How significant is Ankara's position in the current ceasefire diplomacy?
It's very important that Islamic and Arab countries, especially those who met with President Trump in New York at the UN Assembly and who gave the green light to his 20-point plan, are involved in the execution of the ceasefire agreement. Unfortunately, Israel has, according to some reports, violated the agreement by 60 times. They refused to move into the second phase. They're not allowing heavy equipment, as your journalist reported, which are needed to uncover the bodies that are under heavy rubble, and also the not allowing the Turkey's team, which is very expert on finding bodies. It doesn't make sense. The Israelis are saying that they don't want Turkey to be involved in the safekeeping force, but Turkey is a NATO member, and there's no reason why they should be not involved in all aspects of this ceasefire or post-ceasefire efforts.
Okay. Now, Dawood, the idea of a stabilization force does sound promising, but who would actually contribute troops or resources, and how realistic is international consensus on this?
I think there is international consensus. Unfortunately, there's no Israeli consensus. There's no Israeli buy-in to the idea, and without the Israelis agreeing to allowing the stabilization force and agreeing to their mandate, what they will be allowed to do, what are their rules of engagement, it's going to be very difficult because you need a buy-in from two parties. You need Israel and you need Hamas, or at least the armed groups. And I think I think there's a big blame to be made to the Israelis and to the Americans for not following up on the popular big that was made in Sharm el-Sheikh and leaving the forces on the ground to suffer from the Israeli brutality and the overriding power. It's not about who has more power, it's about who's right. And right now, I think the Israelis are trying to delay and delay and delay because they don't want the war to end, because Netanyahu doesn't want to be held accountable by his own people.
Now, as we've repeated, Israel's government has repeatedly rejected external control or security forces in Gaza. Could that opposition derail this initiative before it even takes shape, or do you think we'll see Israel succumbing to this idea because of the international consensus that we also just spoke about?
I think there are two parties here that can make this happen, and they are the US and Turkey. I think there are two parties that can make the Israelis behave and work together. We're not sure how much the Americans will continue to put their effort in this project, but it's very necessary, because the only ones that can stop the Israelis from their brutality and the bulliness is the US, and to another degree, the Turkey. And I think if there is the clarity that all the Arab and Islamic countries are in one voice, I think the US will come along and put pressure on the Israelis.
Okay. And lastly, Dawood, if Türkiye does manage to build momentum around this plan, what would it mean for the broader regional balance and for its relations with the US, Egypt and Israel?
Well, I think it's clear that the conflict did not start October 2023 and it will not end now. We have a much older conflict. The situation in West Bank is going bad. The settlers are having their time. The settlements are increasing. The holy sites in Al-Aqsa Mosque are being violated. So I think we need a much wider conference, but I think Gaza is the pain right now. Everybody's pain because of the death every day of Gazans and the absence of food and normal life. So we all want Gaza to be healed. But yes, you are absolutely right. No ceasefire in the world ends the war unless there is a political track in addition to the ceasefire and the observance that all sides are observing ceasefire. We need a peace track, a political track that will make sure that the parties that resisted the Israeli occupation are going to be addressed, and their the injustice that they've been living under for 77 years will be addressed both in the refugee issue and in the creation of a Palestinian state.
Okay. Dawood, it's an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us and thanks for your insight. In other news, after 3 days of violent protests in Tanzania, at least 500 people have been killed in clashes with security forces. Demonstrations erupted nationwide during Wednesday's vote, with protesters angered by the exclusion of President Samia Suluhu Hassan's two main challengers from the race and what they describe as rising repression of government critics. Hassan, who inherited the presidency in 2021, went on to win her first presidential election. Brazil is calling for international cooperation to help vulnerable nations respond to climate change. Environment Minister Marina Silva addressed a press conference ahead of the COP30 Leaders Summit, set to begin next week in Belém, where the country is also expected to rally support for its financial mechanism to conserve forests following its $1 billion pledge.
The maxim of acting locally and thinking globally no longer holds true without global aid to provide local responses to the problem of climate change. The most vulnerable countries will continue to pay the highest price and the greatest cost.
Georgia's EU candidate status has influenced Armenia's growing turn toward Europe, according to Armenia's Prime Minister. Nikol Pashinyan says his country was inspired by Georgia's EU candidate status granted in 2023. Our Nini Nikolashvili brings more from Tbilisi.
When Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan said Georgia's EU candidate status inspired Armenia's move to adopt a law on EU accession, he reflected a genuine shift in regional dynamics. Georgia's candidacy granted in late 2023 showed that closer integration with the European Union is achievable even in a region long influenced by Moscow. For Armenia, it offered a model of engagement based on institutional reform and trade access rather than military alignment. Since then, Pashinyan's government has signaled a gradual turn toward Europe, driven in part by frustration over Russia's declining security role. The law adopted by Armenian parliament on launching the country's accession process to the European Union marks the beginning of a measured reorientation from reliance on Moscow toward a Western framework. Azerbaijan, meanwhile, continues a pragmatic course, expanding energy and transport ties with Europe while avoiding the political commitments of deeper integration. For Russia, the trend is clear: continued pressure on Georgia through economic and political levers and growing irritation with Armenia's outreach to the West. Georgia remains cautious but firm in its European aspirations, while Armenia appears increasingly willing to test the similar ground. The South Caucasus is quietly changing. Georgia's EU candidacy not only advanced its own European path, but also reshaped the regional debate, introducing a new balance of influence across the region. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
A Turkish court sentenced 11 people to life in prison over a fire that killed 78 people at a ski resort in northwest Turkey's Bolu Mountains in January. The owner of the Grand Kartal Hotel was one of the 11 defendants given aggravated life sentences. 34 children were among those killed in the fire, which occurred during school holidays when many families from Istanbul and Ankara head to the Bolu Mountains to ski. More than 130 people were injured. The blaze in the 12-storey building, where 238 people were staying, forced panicked hotel guests to jump from windows. Uzbekistan is hosting the UNESCO General Conference, bringing together representatives from nearly 200 countries. The forum aims to strengthen international dialogue on education, science and culture in the middle of global challenges and rapid technological change.
The conference has opened in the ancient city of Samarkand, marking the first time in 4 decades that UNESCO's main assembly is held outside Paris. More than 2,800 participants from 190 countries have gathered in Uzbekistan, united by shared commitment to preserve cultural and human heritage in the 21st century. President Shavkat Mirziyoyev delivered the opening address, joined by Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić and Slovak President Peter Pellegrini as honorary guests. The Uzbek leader proposed several initiatives, including the School of Artificial Intelligence, a UNESCO Academy for Women's Leadership, and a Green Capital program aimed at combining heritage preservation with innovation and sustainability. The conference also comes as UNESCO faces a period of global turbulence, with the United States planning to withdraw from the organization again by 2026. The forum will determine UNESCO's program and budget for 2027 and elect new leadership. The Samarkand session stands as a symbol of renewal and cooperation, reaffirming the global commitment to safeguard knowledge, culture and shared human values. It is Sevilla Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Thank you for joining me. That's your news update for now. Make sure you stay tuned to A News.